Spoiler man, warns about spoilers when he can. Look out, this video has spoilers for both Spider-Verses. This bit is getting old. So, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has been out for a year as of June 2nd, and a lot has been said about it. It was one of the most popular movies of last year, and one of 2 profitable superhero movies, which says a lot about the society we live in, does it not? While much has been spoken in relation to the cinematic achievement and its themes and characters, one aspect of the film I haven't heard as much discourse about is perhaps one of its core, the having your cake and eating it too metaphor. This, to me, is one of the most interesting themes explored in Across, and when thinking on this topic and doing some research, I realized just how much this theme permeates the film. It's seeped into the production of the film, the characters and overarching conflict, and the ideas it wants to leave its audience thinking about. This idea of trying to have it all is quite possibly the most developed theme in the film, and I wanted to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's jump into the portal that is this video and go across the different ways this movie does it all. The first stop on this multiversal adventure is to the production of the film and how it showcases the everything is possible mentality of Across the Spider-Verse. The first way the production tried to do it all was in the filmmakers' goals. Lord and Miller wanted to make the movie bigger than its predecessor, but they also wanted to retain a sort of small, relatable feel. As Kemp Powers said in an article for The Wrap, the stakes aren't really the universe. The stakes are very small, understandable, save a person I love. They wanted to make the movie both bigger and even more personal than the first, and they didn't sacrifice or compromise on either of those. In a similar way, the film also does it all by taking the animation of the first film further and makes characters and worlds that shouldn't work. Take Hobie, for example. Hobie is, well, the best character in the movie, maybe aside from Miles, but he's also visually insane and an idea that feels like it shouldn't work, especially alongside spider people with fairly consistent visual styles. Characters like Hobie and DeVulture look simultaneously like they're made of paper and like they're 3D, and also different parts of Hobie are animated at different frame rates, which feels like something that would take me out of the movie, but it works well. Gwen's watercolor world is also both grounded and abstract, and again in a way which wouldn't often work, but here, somehow, they make it work. The biggest way this movie does it both, though, is by even being comprehensible while featuring as many different voices and perspectives as it does. A lot of movies are very auteur-driven. They have one primary filmmaker responsible for crafting much of the film, and the film is largely considered to be a product of their vision. See Martin Scorsese, or Steven Spielberg, or Akira Kurosawa, or a whole host of other filmmakers who are considered the primary authors of their films. The Spider-Verse movies like to do things differently. Lord and Miller's philosophy since Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs has been to constantly refine movies and listen to other people's ideas to ultimately make the best movie possible. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs even starts with the card saying, a film by a lot of people, and that mentality has continued throughout their career. But never in their movies has a film felt like such a collaborative effort as it has with Across the Spider-Verse. Across the Spider-Verse feels like a film one person couldn't come up with, experimental in a way that feels like they refined all of the best ideas over the half-decade of production into this film. One example of this was the character of Spider-Man India, whose characterization completely changed when Indian members of the team emailed the directors. We very quickly assembled a writer's room of Indian and Indian American writers, Kemp Powers, one of the directors, says, which included Karan Soni and comedian Hassan Minhaj. We literally rewrote the entire sequence and reimagined the Pob character, and then Chris and Phil very quickly rewrote the entire script for that section so that Pob's characterization completely changed. This concept feels like it shouldn't work. A bunch of people with creative input and different ideas all making the same movie should lead to a jumbled and confusing mess, but it doesn't. As Chris Miller said, we all know where we're heading and we have the same goal, but how to get there or what it ultimately is at the end is part of what everybody brings to it. The film, in a lot of areas of production, showcases an everything is possible mentality by, wait, what's happening? I'm getting word that we have to go to another universe right now because this section is getting too long and maybe we'll start a canon event, which could cause me to lose all of my audience retention, which would not be good. So our next stop is to talk about the characters in conflict and how they represent this theme. Across the Spider-Verse is a film with a lot of characters. There are a whole bunch of spider people, plus all the normies like Rio and Jeff Morales, plus Captain Stacy, Genki, and also the villains like the Spot and Boring Rhino, who aren't normies but also aren't spider people. But what do all of these characters do to support the film's theme of having it all? Well, a lot, but I want this video to be somewhat reasonably length, so I'm gonna focus on the main ones. Miles is the easiest character to bring up because he's the one most affected by the idea of not being able to have it all. He's the one who says,
"Unless you bake 2 cakes,"
when told he can't have his cake and eat it too, and he embodies this mentality throughout the film, even past the part where he gets 2 cakes. In his case, he wants to have and eat the cake of telling his parents he's Spider-Man and not being viewed differently by them. Later in the film, he wants to have it all by saving his home world from the Spot without having to sacrifice his dad to fulfill a canon event. His whole deal is going against the limits everyone sets on him, breaking out of the boxes people put him in, so I think it would only be fitting to talk next about the main person setting these limits, Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099. Being the leader of the Spider Society, and also someone who broke the canon once himself, he's in an understandable position to want to stop Miles from saving his dad, because he knows what could happen. But just like another character whom we shall get to later, Miguel doesn't know for a fact that Miles saving his father and disrupting a canon event is actually as big of an issue as he's convinced it is. Many people have pointed out how his story and his explanation of the canon don't fully make sense, and they kind of fall apart when you think about them. Like how Mumbattan's destruction doesn't match the dissolvement of the universe Miguel went to, or how Miguel's thing counts as a canon event even though he didn't deprive the world of a specific Spider-Man canon event by being there, so if anything, his original world would have been more susceptible to damage from the disruption of a canon event. I think and hope we'll get answers to these in Beyond the Spider-Verse, because I don't think the writers would leave plot holes wide enough for guys like DeVulture to get in, but only time will tell. So my, and a lot of other people's, assumption is that Miguel's theory about canon events is completely incorrect. But the point is, he doesn't even consider he could be wrong. He believes in inherent limitations.
Being Spider-Man is a sacrifice,
he says. He's the one who tells Miles,
"You can't have it all, kid."
Which per the filmmaker's commentary was originally going to be, "You can't have your cake and eat it too," but the writers thought that would be too on the nose. He's the one most concerned with upholding the canon, and he'll do just about anything to stop Miles. The last notable character in regards to this theme of having it all is Gwen. Gwen is interesting because for most of the movie, she sides with Miguel. She buys into the canon and all that it entails, even the whole death of a police captain close to Spider-Man deal. But by the end, she goes against Miguel and says,
"One thing I learned from Miles, it's all possible."
How did this happen? Well, for one, she saw Miguel call Miles a mistake and blamed him for the death of Earth 1610 Spider-Man, and he sent her home when she questioned his motives. But I think another important factor was her dad. At the start of the movie, Gwen and her dad have a falling out when she reveals her secret identity to him and he tries to arrest her, and then she joins the Spider Society and we switch to Miles' story. When Gwen jumps into Miles' universe, one of the things they talk about is revealing their secret identities to their parents. Gwen warns Miles against doing that because of her experience, which, from how prevalent it is in other Spider-Man media, I don't think it's a stretch to consider the secret identity part of Spider-Man to be a sort of canon event. At the very least, Gwen warns Miles not to because she thinks it will always end the way it did for her. But when she's sent back to Earth 65, she talks with her dad and they work things out. This thing she thought was a certainty, her dad rejecting her when he found out she was Spider-Woman, isn't. She can have it all, a supportive dad and a dad who knows who she really is. This scene also references the breaking of another canon event, with her dad resigning from the police and no longer being captain. In this scene, she realizes what she thought might be possible when she questioned Miguel. She can have it all. So, by the end of the movie, she's formed her band to go and save Miles, and the rest is yet to be seen. While I don't think this universe will collapse if we stay in it too long because canon events probably aren't real and they probably can't hurt you, I also think we should move it along to our next universe because I don't really want to find out if I'm wrong the hard way, and also because I think we've talked enough here, so let's move on and talk about what the filmmakers are really trying to say with this having it all theme. Across the Spider-Verse wasn't made so audiences could watch people do stuff but with really cool animation. It was made so audiences could watch people do stuff but with really cool animation and also hear and see some neat little commentary. Plain and simple, this commentary is, as Gwen states at the end of the picture, it's all possible. But what does it's all possible apply to? First, and most obviously, Spider-Man. This movie is pretty clearly against the notion that all Spider-Man stories need to adhere to some sort of canon. While yes, this is technically only part one of the story, so who knows how it will end, Chris Miller did say this in an interview. There's been a lot of anger and hate coming out of wanting to preserve things the way they've always been. That's not how society works. We need to keep evolving and making things new and growing. We can't just perfectly preserve the past. Phil Lord added, "The movies you love were all daring in their time. The idea isn't to copy them, it's to be as equally daring as Snow White or Toy Story or Jaws. So, with the idea of wanting to be as equally daring as the stories people love, I don't think the Spider-Verse movies will ultimately support the idea of every Spider-Man story needing to have the exact same events happen. This idea also applies outside of Spider-Man with the notion of your path isn't set in stone. I think often people feel like their limitations are inevitable, like they can't do something because they don't think they're capable of it. And while yes, no one can do everything, patterns can be broken. Just because I push things off until the last minute or don't do something because it looks difficult doesn't mean I have to keep doing that. When you get caught in these negative cycles, you think you're stuck now and this is who you are, but you aren't. The idea of, well, that's just how it is antithetical to progress, and it's also what Amy Pascal used to defend Across the Spider-Verse's overworking of animators, saying, welcome to making a movie. You know, I could totally see Miguel telling Miles welcome to being Spider-Man when he's told he can't save his dad. Maybe Beyond will prove Miguel right after all. This odd and tone-deaf statement aside, the movie isn't saying there won't be problems. Everyone faces problems, even Spider-Man. What it is saying is problems don't define you, and they can be solved. The final thing this movie leaves the audience with in the way of having it all is how. In the Mumbattan Bridge scene, we see a canon event stopped. Pavitr doesn't stop it, Miles does. Pav says in this scene, but he can't. However, both can still be done, just with help. Near the end of the movie, when Gwen says, one thing I learned from Miles, it's all possible, she doesn't say, one thing I learned from Miles, I can do it all. The moral isn't by yourself you can accomplish everything, it's with teamwork anything is possible. We then see her form her band to save Miles and presumably help him save his dad and defeat the Spot, signifying even more the importance of other people to subvert the canon. And I think this movie is the epitome of that idea, because this movie can't or at least shouldn't be attributed to one individual artist. It was the combined effort of thousands that made it as good as it is. Or, as Phil Lord put it, what I enjoy about watching this movie is that it feels like watching a great jazz combo. You're not watching an individual performance, but rather an amazing band of people that are taking turns, soloing and flexing. Each of these guys has a superpower that you get to see. So, it's all possible, and with that, I think our journey shall return to the beginning, one last time. It is impossible to have it all. Things will go wrong, but the knowledge that bad things will happen sometimes doesn't erase good things, and more importantly, it doesn't mean bad things always have to happen, or that you have to accept bad things because that's just how it is. Change is possible, growth is possible, and if you didn't know that before, I hope you do now. You may not be able to have it all, but you can have more than you ever thought possible. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse showcases this in the many ways it defies the limits put on movies like it, limits in scope, limits in animation, and limits in collaboration, as well as the characters, with Miles going against these limits, Miguel fighting back, and Gwen realizing it's all possible, and it ultimately tells the audience Spider-Man stories don't need to follow the same path, you don't need to follow the same path, and with help, we all can be better than we're made to believe. I am unbelievably excited for Beyond the Spider-Verse, and whatever happens, I have no doubt the talented artists working on it will create something truly spectacular. Just please don't overwork them this time, that's not cool. If this movie has taught me anything, it's that limitations aren't always what they seem, and I think Beyond the Spider-Verse can have it all, even properly treated animators. Come on, if Seth Rogen can do it, so can you.